On July 5th, 2025, the world waited. A prophecy drawn 26 years earlier was about to be tested. But what really happened? Some dreams are like smoke, rising quietly, vanishing before dawn. Others stay with us, etched into memory, like a message whispered by something beyond comprehension. In the summer of 1999, a quiet woman in Japan released a hand-drawn booklet that almost no one noticed. It bore a plain title, The Future I Saw. Just a handful of graphite sketches and sparse, cryptic words. It didn't sell. It wasn't promoted. It wasn't even polished. And yet, decades later, that book would become the subject of whispered forums, late-night theories, and growing unease. Because inside those pages were dreams, and many of them, far too many, began to unfold in real life. The woman behind the book used only a pen name, Tatsuki. To this day, no one can say with full certainty who she is or why she vanished shortly after publication. But what we do know is this. The book contained 15 dreams, all drawn before the turn of the millennium. Since then, nearly everyone has eerily mirrored world events. Earthquakes, the deaths of famous figures, tidal waves, and strange coincidences. But most haunting of all is the final dream, one that has not yet occurred, or perhaps did, in ways no one expected. And its date, boldly written beneath the sketch, July 5th, 5 a.m. What was this final vision? Could any of it be real? Or was it simply the work of a vivid imagination misunderstood by a fearful public? Today, we revisit the fragments of a forgotten artist's mind, the pages she left behind, the signs the world ignored. This is the story of Tatsuki and the future she claimed to see. On July 1st, 1999, in a small bookstore tucked away in a quiet Tokyo district, a thin, self-published booklet appeared. It had no advertisement, no signature style, no known author, just a soft, cloud-gray cover with a single line, The Future I Saw. Inside, sketched in pencil and captioned with barely legible handwriting, were 15 scenes, each one labeled with a date, a time, a place. They were dreams, but they didn't feel like dreams. They read like warnings. Most people who stumbled across the book thought it odd, maybe even pretentious. The artwork was rough, sometimes childlike, sometimes hauntingly detailed. Some pages showed cities flooded with seawater. Others revealed faceless crowds staring up at something unseen. One simply showed an old man sitting by a clock that read 5 o'clock. But what stood out most was not the imagery. It was the timestamps. Specific days, specific years, future events, not yet arrived. At the time, there was no reason to care. The world had not yet witnessed what was to come. But all of that changed in the spring of 2011. On March 11th of that year, Japan suffered one of the most devastating natural disasters in its modern history. A magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck the ocean floor, near Tohoku, triggering a massive tsunami that swallowed entire towns, destroyed nuclear plants, and claimed over 15,000 lives. The footage gripped the world. Black waves crashing over seawalls, cars swept away like leaves, people screaming from rooftops. The nation mourned. The world watched in silence. And then something strange happened. A user on an old internet forum posted a thread titled, "Did anyone else read The Future I Saw?" In it, they showed photos of the 1999 booklet, one sketch in particular. It was crude, but unmistakable. A shoreline submerged by waves, buildings collapsed, and the numbers, 311 scrawled in the corner. The date of the tsunami. That post ignited a firestorm. Within days, thousands began searching for the original book. Copies resurfaced online. Pages were scanned, translated, analyzed. A list began to circulate. Of the 15 dreams, readers claimed 12 and a half had already come true. That half dream, a sketch with no date but matching fragments of a known event, was considered too close to ignore. People began to ask, who was Tatsuki? And more importantly, what was the final dream? As interest in the future I saw exploded online, so too did speculation about its mysterious creator. Who was this woman who had drawn such precise dreams years before they came true? Searches for the name Tatsuki led nowhere. The original publishing address was a dead end. The distributor listed on the 1999 booklet had long since shut down. No social records, no media appearances, no digital footprint. It was as if Tatsuki had never existed or had deliberately erased herself. In a world where every image, name, and file can be tracked, traced, or reconstructed, her vanishing was more than strange. It was unsettling. People began to theorize. Was she a pen name for someone in government? A whistleblower disguised as an artist? An anonymous medium channeling something from the other side of consciousness? Even whispers of conspiracy circulated. Some claimed the book was a test, planted to see how humanity would react to prediction. Others said it was part of a forgotten psychological experiment. The speculation spiraled, and in the absence of answers, many filled the silence with their own truths. Then, in October of 2023, 24 years after the book's quiet release, Tatsuki returned. Without warning, an updated version of The Future I Saw appeared on shelves, this time with her full name, photographs, and detailed personal notes. For the first time, the public was given a glimpse of the woman behind the mystery. Tatsuki was born on December 2, 1954, in Kanagawa Prefecture. She grew up near Yokohama, the daughter of an ordinary civil servant and a homemaker. Her childhood was, by all appearances, uneventful. She liked to draw, spent long afternoons watching the sea, and sang in her school's chorus. But around the age of 9, something shifted. Tatsuki began to experience dreams she could not explain, dreams that felt more like memories from a life not yet lived. She described them as vivid, emotional, and strangely consistent. Always calm, always quiet, and always featuring a single recurring figure, an elderly man with silver hair, soft eyes, and a low, comforting voice. In nearly every dream, he would appear beside her, walking beneath moonlight or standing in silent rooms, whispering things that made no sense at the time, but later unfolded with chilling precision. He never gave his name. He never told her why he came, but he was always there, watching, guiding, reminding. The first dream that shook her happened in 1976. She was just 21 years old when she dreamt of a stage, glowing under soft amber lights. A man stood alone, singing, his voice powerful yet vulnerable, and then suddenly he collapsed. The lights flickered, the crowd gasped, and silence swallowed the scene. Tatsuki knew the man instantly. It was Freddie Mercury. At the time, Mercury was in the prime of his life. Queen was climbing the charts. His energy on stage was unmatched. No one could have imagined the tragedy that lay ahead. But Tatsuki, disturbed by what she'd seen, quietly recorded the dream. She sketched the scene in her journal and wrote the date in the margin. November 1976. 15 years later, on November 24th, 1991. Freddie Mercury died. The world mourned. News outlets aired documentaries. Memorials sprang up across continents. One broadcast in particular showed fans working on a biographical film in his honor. In that moment, Tatsuki felt a chill, not because of the death, but because she had drawn that exact image in 1976. A film crew, camera lights, a story being told posthumously. It wasn't just the event she had seen, it was the aftermath. From that day forward, she stopped questioning the dreams. She began to record everything, no matter how small: the time, the light, the temperature, the names she heard, the scent in the air, every emotional impression, every whispered line, every detail. Some dreams came true 5 years later. Others took 10. A few followed a precise 15-year pattern. It was unpredictable, but it was undeniable. She knew something was happening, something that couldn't be brushed off as imagination or luck. On August 31st, 1992, she had another vision. This time, she was walking through a long corridor bathed in golden light. At the far end hung a painting of a woman with golden hair, holding a child. The name Dana was scrawled across the canvas. Then, without warning, a deafening crash. Screams, metal tearing against stone. She woke up breathless. 5 years later, on August 31st, 1997, the world was shaken by another loss. Princess Diana had died in a car crash in Paris. The corridors of grief that followed stretched across nations. Once again, Tatsuki opened her journal and stared at the pages she had drawn years earlier. The corridor, the painting, the moment of impact. It was all there, roughly drawn, but unmistakable. By the late 1990s, the dreams became more intense and more catastrophic. They were no longer about individuals, but about nature itself. Floods, fires, earthquakes, and collapse. One in particular haunted her deeply. On January 2nd, 1995, she dreamt of a torn landscape. The earth had split. Dust hung in the air like smoke. The sky was low and heavy. And then the old man appeared again. This time, he simply pointed to the ground and whispered, 15 days. Tatsuki woke up and circled the date in her journal. Below it, she wrote, something will rupture. 15 days later, on January 17th, 1995, the Great Hanshin earthquake, also known as the Kobe quake, struck Japan. Over 6,000 lives were lost. Nearly 250,000 people were left homeless. Bridges collapsed. Fires spread. The country reeled. This time, Tatsuki didn't just record it. She began drawing obsessively. Pages filled with fragments, sea foam, cracks in the earth, clock hands frozen at 5 o'clock. She felt something more was coming, something that would tie all the dreams together. And so, in 1999, she self-published The Future I Saw, a compilation of 15 dreams, selected from hundreds she had recorded over the years. Some were dated, others left blank. Some were clearly symbolic, others felt horrifyingly literal. She included no interpretations, only drawings. And then, she vanished again. For years, the book went unnoticed, a whisper buried beneath the noise of daily life. Then, on March 11th, 2011, the whisper became a scream. That day, at exactly 2:46 p.m., the Pacific Ocean shifted with unimaginable force. A magnitude 9.0 earthquake, one of the strongest in recorded history, erupted off the northeastern coast of Japan. The shockwaves cracked roads, buckled buildings, and tilted the very ground beneath cities. But it wasn't the earthquake that the country would remember. It was what followed. A tsunami, dark, furious, merciless, rushed toward the shore. Entire towns disappeared beneath a wall of black water. Cars floated like toys. Ships were tossed inland. Nuclear reactors at Fukushima were crippled. The nation stood in silence, the rest of the world watching in horror. And then came the book. Someone online remembered the obscure comic from 1999, the one with waves and clocks and strangely specific numbers. They dug it out, scanned the cover, and froze. There, etched faintly in pencil, 3-1-1. A shoreline swallowed by waves, a city submerged, a note in the margin. The sea rises when the earth groans. The images spread like wildfire. Forums lit up. News outlets picked up the thread. Within days, the future I saw went from a forgotten sketchbook to a national curiosity. People began dissecting every page. Were these just coincidences? Or were they warnings, overlooked for a decade? The evidence was unsettling. Dream after dream seemed to mirror real events. A collapsing stadium, a famous singer's funeral, a crumbling bridge in a major city, a sketch titled "The Night the Ground Screamed" showed buildings half submerged, nearly identical to footage from post-tsunami Sendai. And then came the most debated image of all, a faceless woman standing on what looked like the edge of a broken continent. Her hands were outstretched. Behind her, a city crumbled. Before her, the sea parted to reveal something rising, a new shape, a new land. And beneath her feet, the time, 5 a.m., the date, July 5th. This final sketch was unlike the others. It had no context, no margin notes, but the detail was greater. The lines were clearer, the image deliberate. It felt like an ending, or perhaps a beginning. As the public obsession grew, a new wave of confusion hit. Imposters claiming to be Tatsuki began surfacing on social media. Some posted new, prophetic drawings. Others released entire fake sequels. The noise diluted the signal. Was this just hysteria? Were people projecting patterns where none existed? Many began to dismiss the whole story as elaborate fiction. Yet others, those who had followed her work from the shadows, felt something deeper, something unfinished. Then, in 2023, the silence broke. Without fanfare, without press, a new edition of The Future I Saw quietly appeared in select Tokyo bookstores. The cover was the same, but inside, everything had changed. This was no longer a cryptic booklet. It was a complete archive. Each dream had been expanded, annotated, dated. The handwriting was the same, but older, slower, more certain. At the end of the book was a final chapter, simply titled, "The Dream That Returned." It recounted a vision from July 2021. Tatsuki wrote that she awoke in the middle of the night, soaked in cold sweat. Her hands trembled, her heart raced. She had seen something terrifying, yet not entirely new. In the dream, she stood on a high cliff, overlooking a silent sea. The sky was ash-colored, heavy with stillness. Not a bird, not a wave, just silence. Then, bubbles began to rise from the water, one by one at first, then in clusters, then in great, boiling masses, as if something enormous stirred beneath the ocean floor. And then they came. Two enormous, twisting shapes rose from the depths. Serpentine, ancient, covered in glimmering scales. They did not fly. They hovered, circling the center of the sea like guardians of something ancient, something waiting. One curled east, the other west, and as they turned, the sea cracked open. A column of water, higher than any skyscraper, erupted from the center. not a wave, a wall, and then behind it, a roar that wasn't sound, but vibration. The earth itself groaned, and then silence again. Tatsuki awoke with a sense of dread she could not shake. She recognized the scene. It was the same one from her 1999 dream, but now it had returned, clearer, sharper, and urgent. She believed, with chilling certainty, that the vision was connected to real tectonic movements beneath the Pacific, and that something was coming. In her notes, she mentioned two undersea tectonic plates, the Philippine Sea Plate and the Pacific Plate, whose boundaries lay dangerously close to where the dragons had appeared in her dream. She wasn't a scientist. She didn't make predictions with data, but her dreams had mapped reality before, and she feared they were doing it again. The new edition of the book ended with one sentence, a whisper circled in red ink. "If it comes, it will come at dawn. July 5th, 5 a.m. In her final dream, the one that returned 2 decades later with greater clarity, Tatsuki was not alone in her fear. She described standing at an impossible height, as if suspended in the air, watching the entire Pacific basin unfold beneath her like a living map. To her left, the coastline of Japan. To her right, the edge of Taiwan. In the distance, the silhouettes of Hong Kong and the northern islands of the Philippines. The water between them was strangely calm, as if the sea had stopped breathing. And then it happened. From the depths, huge air pockets began to rise, silent at first, then hissing. The ocean churned like a boiling pot. The dragons, once hidden beneath the surface, appeared again. 2 massive forms twisting in slow spirals, coiling around an invisible axis. They didn't speak. They didn't roar. They only watched. Their eyes locked onto a central point beneath the sea. And then, the eruption. A towering pillar of water, larger than any known tsunami, burst into the sky, glowing with molten steam. The force cracked the clouds. The light bent. And then came the sound. A deep, echoing thunder, not from the sky, but from the ocean floor itself. It was the sound of something ancient awakening. The wave followed, furious, relentless. Tatsuki wrote that it moved as though guided, not in chaos, but in order. She watched it crash against the coastlines. Cities drowned, highways vanished, towers bent like reeds. Yet through it all, there was no screaming, just silence, as if the world had collectively held its breath. And then, beneath the vanishing waters, something began to rise. She described it not as an island, but as a continent. It did not emerge with violence, but with purpose, as if it had been there all along, hidden under layers of water and time. Wet soil peeled upward, sharp stone lifted into jagged ridges, valleys formed, rivers carved themselves into shape, and the land stretched, wider than any nation, older than any border. Tatsuki wrote, "It rose like an ancient truth, not a beginning and not an end, but something the earth had remembered." She saw it connect Japan's southern islands with Taiwan, then stretching further, linking to the shores of Hong Kong and curling toward the Philippine archipelago. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't metaphor. It was land. Real, physical, permanent. And atop this new mass, she saw no buildings, no machines, just open space, wild, untouched, waiting. In the dream, Tatsuki descended from her aerial view and found herself standing upon the new earth. The sky had cleared, and though the ocean still roared in the distance, the ground beneath her feet was warm, alive. And then, a voice. Not the silver-haired man this time, but a different voice, quieter and from within. They will not understand, but those who prepare will survive. Tatsuki woke up in tears. It was not the destruction that haunted her. It was what came after. A silence so vast, so total, that she couldn't be sure if it meant peace or extinction. She included this dream in the updated book, not as a prediction, but as a warning. One that she believed would mean nothing to most, but everything to a few. She wrote, "If only one person takes it seriously, if one life is saved, it was worth drawing." She didn't claim to be a prophet. She didn't offer proof. She simply drew what she saw, and in doing so, offered the world a choice. Dismiss it, or consider that the future, no matter how unpredictable, might sometimes whisper before it screams. When Tatsuki released her updated manuscript, it didn't just capture the imagination of believers and skeptics. It caught the attention of scientists, geologists, seismologists, experts who had spent decades mapping the ocean floor and predicting the behavior of tectonic plates. What surprised them most was not the symbolism of Tatsuki's dreams, but their geographic precision. The dragons she drew? Their positions matched the edge zones of two of Earth's most volatile tectonic plates, the Philippine Sea Plate and the Pacific Plate. These plates converge beneath one of the most dangerous geological regions on Earth, the Pacific Ring of Fire, a place known for birthing earthquakes, for unleashing volcanoes, and, every so often, for creating new land. In 2013, scientists observed something strange off the coast of Japan's Nishinoshima Island. An underwater volcano erupted, unexpectedly and without warning. Within weeks, a new island began to form. Satellite images captured it. Black rock rising from boiling sea, expanding rapidly. By the end of the year, it had merged with the main island, doubling its size. And that wasn't the only case. In 2021, a similar eruption occurred in the Kuril Islands, a contested chain between Japan and Russia. Again, a new island emerged. Untouched, unnamed, uninhabited. The sea had given birth to land, proof that such processes weren't fantasy, but fact. Still, no one had ever predicted the kind of mass-scale uplift Tatsuki described, a new continent rising between four nations. But then, someone looked deeper. An international research team from Yokohama University reviewed her sketches and compared them to seabed elevation models beneath the Philippine Sea. They found something unexpected. Hidden beneath layers of sediment and thermal crust was a ridge, massive, unstable, stretching like a scar between Taiwan and the Ryukyu Islands. It was known, but never closely studied. The team noted that a major tectonic shift here could, in theory, displace enough ocean floor to cause an uplift event. It wouldn't happen easily. It might never happen. But it was possible. Not probable, but possible. Tatsuki never claimed scientific expertise. She didn't talk about fault lines or volcanic gas buildup. She simply shared what she saw in dreams, visions that time after time had lined up with reality. Some researchers called it chance. Others suspected she had a rare form of subconscious pattern recognition, an ability to perceive seismic or atmospheric signals while asleep, a phenomenon still not fully understood by modern science. One neurologist from Kyoto put it this way: "We know the brain can detect barometric pressure changes, electromagnetic shifts, and even deep-sea acoustics. Maybe, just maybe, her mind translated those signals into imagery, into metaphor, into dreams." And yet, there were others, quiet voices in academic corners, who weren't so dismissive. A professor of comparative mythology noted that in many ancient cultures, Dragons represented tectonic power, not fantasy creatures, but living metaphors for earthquakes and eruptions. Chinese, Japanese, even Mesopotamian lore spoke of serpents coiled beneath the earth, creatures whose stirring could reshape nations. Perhaps Tatsuki's dragons weren't literal. Perhaps they were echoes, symbols summoned by the subconscious to represent the unseeable. Pressure building, crust shifting, the planet preparing to speak. And then came the question no one wanted to ask, but everyone feared. Could such a dream still come true? After all, the date in her final entry, 5 a.m., July 5th, was approaching fast. And in the world of geology, time means nothing until it suddenly means everything. As the world turned toward the date, 5 a.m., July 5th, 2025, Tatsuki's book quietly re-entered public discourse. It wasn't viral. It wasn't sensational. But in the quiet corners of the internet, among forums, discussion boards, and anonymous video essays, the countdown had begun. Some people prepared, quietly. A few families relocated temporarily from Japan's southern coastlines. Some monitored the volcanic activity in the Philippine Sea more closely than usual, and a handful kept emergency supplies on hand. Not out of fear, but out of respect for a strange pattern that had repeated too many times to dismiss. But Tatsuki herself remained silent. She gave no interviews, no public statements, not even a single online post. Only the updated book stood in her place, with one final page, one final entry, handwritten in delicate black ink. A message that carried no prediction, no terror, no claim of special insight. Only this: even if the dream never comes to pass, it still had meaning. Perhaps it was not warning, but mercy. Perhaps the point was never to prove anything, only to say, look up once in a while. The sky changes, and we forget too quickly. On the morning of July 5th, 2025, the world turned quietly. No apocalypse, no dragons, no land rising from the sea. Some laughed, others breathed in relief. But for those who had followed Tatsuki since her earliest days, the ones who had seen her sketches come true one after another, they knew it was never really about the date. It was about the pattern. Because the truth is, nature doesn't follow calendars. Catastrophe doesn't keep appointments. Earthquakes don't respect forecasts. And dreams, real or imagined, often arrive not to predict the future, but to prepare the soul. And maybe that was her gift all along. Not prophecy, but preparation. A mirror she held up, not to the future, but to us, to remind us how fragile the illusion of permanence really is, that buildings fall, oceans shift, entire nations can disappear beneath a wave in the time it takes to blink. And so, what remains now is not the terror of what might come, but the quiet awe that one woman, in her solitude, spent a lifetime drawing what she could not explain. Her journal is complete now. 15 dreams, 14 that came true, and one that hasn't. Yet. But maybe it was never meant to. Maybe the final dream is ours, to carry, to question, to guard, and to remember, even when nothing happens, especially when nothing happens. Because sometimes the loudest warnings are the ones that leave no sound at all.